Hello, everybody. This is Nancy Briggs, your instructor for Art 114 online. I am making this lecture video for you. If you were in class, you would have had 3 classes to cover the prehistoric chapter. So I'm going to go over the materials. I'm going to enhance some things you should know. How the slides work is that the titles of things will be italicized and vocabulary words will be in red. So you might want to take notes on those. To begin, we start at the beginning, of course, with the first art that man has made, but I like to start the course with this. This is not prehistoric art. This is a painting done by René Magritte. And if you were in class, I would say, tell me what this is. And I'm sure 100% of you would say this is a pipe. If you speak French, this down here, "Ce n'est pas un pipe," means this is not a pipe. Magritte painted that beneath the painting of a pipe, sort of pointing out that this is just an image of a pipe. It is a painting of a pipe. It can never be a pipe. And I begin with this because this is sort of our history with images. We read images as the thing. And this is an important thing to note because even very early man had the ability to project images and see them or perceive them as the thing. So art is a representation of a concept or object, real or imagined. Picasso liked to say art is a lie that tells the truth. And the idea behind the pipe painting is that the equivalency between the image and reality is accepted. That is, when we see the image of something, we accept it as equal to the real thing. And we talk about it as the real thing. And that is an important thing to note as we start looking at prehistoric man. And so the whole book begins with this pebble found 3 million years ago, or not found. It was found from 3 million years ago, and for some reason somebody kept this in their possession and traveled around with it. And I think you can see that it resembles a face, and that's probably why they picked this up and carried it with them. So this is exactly what the pipe thing is doing. Somebody looked at this and projected reality onto an image and accepted it as a representation of that thing. The person who carried this around did some incising on the face, maybe to emphasize the eyes. It seems to be scratched around the eyes and then down the nose and on the corners of the mouth. So probably the faceness of it is being emphasized. This is controversially the first work of art found so far, but it was not crafted, meaning it was not made by somebody, it was found by somebody. We might consider the scratches or the incising to be some form of art, but really it's a little bit controversial whether this is the first work of art ever found. So this was an object carried by hand. We consider that a manuport. It's a Latin term for carried by hand. It was brought from one place to another. And again, it's evidence of very early man being able to project meaning of a face onto a pebble. This is conceptual thinking, abstract thought. And this sort of was very revolutionary for archaeologists when this was found. And this is not unlike what we do, right? We look at this is a picture of Mars. People often say this is a face, or during the pandemic, I started to see sea lions or otters in my sweet potatoes, right? We understand how to project images onto things like clouds or something like that. Picasso saw things out of other things. He saw a bicycle seat and handlebars as a bull. So it's important to talk about human evolution when we're talking about prehistoric art. Very early man starts in Africa. He makes tools. He travels in groups. Homo erectus, first man standing, had very finely made tools. As a matter of fact, they're very decorative, and some people consider those the first works of art. They did not bury their dead, and that's important to note because we're going to look in the future. Is this what we call a civilization? The first humans, these were the first humans to spread over land all over Europe. And the knowledge of hunting and tool making is passed on with Homo erectus. And so we think of this as culture, a learned knowledge communicated from generations. Anything you weren't born knowing how to do that is a thing that a society teaches you is considered to be culture. And so the question that we have to ask is this also done with art? Is this knowledge communicated and passed on from culture and generation to culture? So the time period that we're really looking at, we start with cave painting around here, but we got the pebble, way back, and the pebble kind of changed this chart quite a bit. That's what these little hatch marks are. Right, so we have man who behaves as anatomically similar to us, modern man, or we have man who behave similar to us, Homo sapiens. And so we consider this the first art, or was considered the first art here. And of course, that's ever extending. More and more things are found. All the caves were found very recently, so stay tuned. All right, but the problems in prehistoric art is that if we keep pushing this back, this time period of it, when did man recognize art or craft art? Can we say that there was probably art before this Ice Age technology, which we're going to consider about this time? Right? The real problem is we haven't found any, but that does not mean it does not exist. And so in art history, we often use this term: absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. And that just means just because it's not out there yet doesn't mean it's not out there. You can't prove something doesn't exist by it not being there. All right, so we talk about the Stone Age, and it's called the Stone Age because man used stone tools. So lith means stone, and paleo means old. So we have the Paleolithic, the Old Stone Age, the Mesolithic, the Middle Stone Age, and the Neolithic, the New Stone Age. So these are the three periods that you need to know for this chapter. We are looking, this pebble's down in Africa, but man starts traveling all around, and most of the caves we look at are here. We'll look at sculptures from up here, and of course, we'll get up to Stonehenge by the end of the chapter. So what's life like for Paleolithic man in the Old Stone Age? Well, it's still the Ice Age. They're nomadic, moving around, following food, herds of animals. You have to go where the food goes. The average lifespan is mid-20s, so a lot of you listening will probably be elderly during this time. There is a high infant mortality rate, and that is important to note for some of the things we're going to look at. So their days are very busy hunting and gathering and moving, inventing fire and all that stuff. Food, clothing, shelter, every day. And yet, at this point, man begins to make representational images. They find the time or the desire or the need to make images. This is one of the earliest things ever found. And this is it's called the Apollo 11 cave because the archaeologist who discovered it, I think Apollo 11 had just landed, and he decided to name it after that. This is in Namibia. It's in Africa. And for this course, I should say, you do not have to memorize dates. You should know Paleolithic, Mesolithic, Neolithic time periods. I do not need you to memorize dates, especially since these are circa, or you have like 10,000 years in between. Don't, spend all your brain power memorizing dates. It is charcoal, so a burnt substance drawn on stone. And this is called a feline with human feet, so that's why it's italicized there. All right, so this is a feline head with possible horns and human-like legs. So it's on a slab. I just said that. So barely visible on the head of the animal are two slightly curved horns. So what does this mean? This means that man is not just seeing representational things, but possibly having the human capacity for abstract thinking or conceptual thinking, because this is not a thing that can be representational. It's not a real thing. So, like I said, this is the problem with prehistory. The knowledge and the definitions of thing have to keep expanding. This is what art history books used to start with, and this is called the Venus, or more correctly, the Woman of Willendorf. She is from Australia, and she is standing at 4¼ inches high. And of course, she's referred to as Venus incorrectly because she is not from ancient Greece or Rome. She is definitely from the Paleolithic period. She has exaggerated female parts to her figure. She has tiny little arms and hands resting on her breasts. She has no face, and she has elaborate hair or headdress. So this could possibly be like a woven kind of headdress or braids. And nonetheless, she seems to be out of proportion and faceless, being emphasized for her femaleness. And she's not the only one. This isn't the first. It's a very well-preserved one, and you can see her from different angles. And she leans back almost as if she's pregnant here, and that is a good thing to think about. There are many of these found. Some are wood, like the one on the left. The one on the left has the scratches or incisings in the head for the headdress or whatever that is supposed to be, or hair. And this one's kind of a little crazy with a tiny, tiny little head here, so you can see what was important to that artist or that culture. And so the question we have to ask is, what are these for? They're tiny little, well, not, I mean, they'll fit in the palm of your hand conveniently. You can carry them around, so another manuport. What are they being used for? And the obvious answer might be, well, it must be some kind of goddess or fertility figure, because it seems to be about emphasizing, um, you know, female body parts, so having to do with reproduction. And that would be a very good guess. But in art history, we have to just sort of line up all the visual evidence and hope to come to some educated conclusion. So a lot of prehistoric art is just guesswork for this chapter, but don't worry, next chapter they will be writing and we'll be able to know what they were talking about. Another woman figure here, woman holding a bison horn. She is a relief sculpture. We're going to start using that term, relief, meaning it's carved into a surface so that it projects out, or the surface around her is carved in this case. It can be a high relief, almost detached from the block, or it can be a low relief. It's also called bas relief or bas relief, French term. So this has two things going on. It also has incising, which is scratched into something, and you could see that on the horn. So again, we have a female figure. She is still emphasized for possibly her reproduction, but she holds a horn up, and it has 13 markings. Now, there's a lot of writing on that. Is it some kind of lunar or menstrual cycle kind of calendar? Well, we don't know that. Is it just decorative? We can see the hand is incised in here too. So we have the other female figures who are portable and held in the hand, almost like good luck charms. But now this is like 1.5 feet tall. So this isn't as easy to carry around. You remember they're nomads. so that doesn't throw that other theory out the window. Um, it just kind of emphasizes, well, now we have other narratives happening here. And then the reclining woman. This is just a reconstruction drawing so you could see it better. She seems to be doing something else. In modern terms, we would say, oh, she's posing. She's being very maybe sexual. But we cannot take our modern sensibilities and apply that to this. We don't know what this pose means to them. So we can only put it together with the other women and say, well, this all seems to be about some kind of maybe fertility or luck or something like that. And with the high mortality rate, they probably needed luck or magic to help them out. This is a head of a woman. This is just a fragment, of course. She's only 1.5 inches high. It is carved from a woolly mammoth ivory tusk. And this is the woman from Brassempoy from France. And you can see she also has an elaborate hairstyle. So it is incised into the head, as are the eyes. And this takes some doing, right? The 1.5 inches, like even though she's attached to a body, to carve a mammoth ivory is very, very difficult. So they must have had very sharp tools and patience. It takes a very long time. So they have the forethought to know how to carve proportions, right? Even though the other figurines we've seen seem to be very out of proportion. This has eyebrows and eyes with pupils here, nostrils. Perhaps they did not get to the mouth, or the mouth isn't important to them. I should say this is also disputed. This may just be the head of a man. So again, can we look at all these and see some common traits? This is what art history does. It gathers the visual evidence from a time period and tries to assess meaning. Now, in general, we'll have some meanings from the history, the written history of things, but prehistory is sort of like a big puzzle that's still being put together. The lion man figure is also carved from a woolly mammoth bone. And I think your book says it took like 400 hours to carve this, most likely. And we're going to use this word going forward. We'll see this in other cultures as well. Anthropomorphic, meaning it has human traits, and it is given to a non-human entity. So a lion with a human body, or it can be reversed too as a human with a lion head. We do know that there were man-eating lions roaming around during this time. And we can only guess what it could mean. Is it some kind of power thing where you're trying to get power over nature by assimilating a human to that thing? Is it supposed to be showing strength in a human because a lion is so strong and fierce? We don't know, but it is what we can assess is that it takes higher level thinking to come up with things, creative things that don't exist in the world. That is abstract and upper level thinking. This is 2 bison. This is found. This is a relief, but it's a high relief, meaning it almost projects off of this. As a matter of fact, it is off of a stone that sticks out with clay molded right on top of it. Of course, it's not fired like pottery would be, so it's not permanent, but it was preserved in the cave and it's still there. And it is an additive technique, meaning instead of carving out and getting rid of materials, the artist had to add the mud materials. And these are very much in proportion, and they have details too. It's not easy to do. The bison licking its flanks. We see this bison, his neck is curved, and we have all this incising in it. This is on a reindeer antler. And you can see that the artist has tried to create the animal so that it fits into the shape of the bone or the antler. It also shows some very creative thinking as well. And we're going to see this kind of over and over again. It's very similar to the pebble when you think of it. They're looking at something and envisioning something else on that. That's very creative thought. And we see this in cave painting as well. So this is Altamira. And just to show you the dates that these were all discovered, Chavot was the last discovered so far, of course, and that was as recent as 1995. That might not sound very recent for some of you, but in art history, since we're starting, 40,000 BCE, that's pretty recent. Oh, and I should mention BCE. We refer to that as before the Common Era. All right, instead of just BC, that's no longer used, and then we will get to CE, the Common Era, very soon. All right, so let's look at the bison in the cave of Altamira. These are painted on the projections of the stone, anything that was curved, and they would paint them. These look like they're lying down, and you still see two antlers. They're done with charcoal and ochre. When it was first discovered, the father and daughter, the father saw something and he sent the daughter in, and she came out and talked about it, and he went in and saw it. They weren't thought to be real, and it took decades for either science to catch up with carbon dating, or just other caves had been discovered at that time and then carbon dated, so they went back and said, oh yes, that is a real cave, that's a real discovery. And this is maybe gives you a little better feel about this. You're not allowed anymore to go into some of these caves because any breath around charcoal, you let like dozens of tourists in there, it's going to go away eventually. But they're very colorful. They use a lot of red ochre and charcoal. And we'll talk more about the meaning after we look at some of these together. So this is the spotted horse and negative handprints. So wall painting this is at Peshmerel in France. So you can see these negative shaped hands here, so that prehistoric man is putting his hand on the cave, and he is, well, not really painting around it, he's blowing pigment around it to leave the stencil of his hand. The dots, you might think this is it, the title is Spotted Horses, but really the dots aren't just on the horses, they're all around. There's some here, there's some up here, over here. We don't know what those dots are for. So the handprints are not drawings, but negative shapes. So prehistoric man would have ground pigments, charcoal and ochre, which is just red clay, pretty much. They would put whatever fat they had, if it was animal fat, on the cave wall as a binding and blow the pigment through a reed around the hand and make a stencil. And we don't know what they're doing. Are these some kind of signature, some kind of message, some kind of magic? And what do all the spots mean? Is this some kind of communication? Or are they counting something? We don't know. Probably the most famous prehistoric paintings are the Hall of Bulls in Lascaux, France. This cave is so famous that they had to they stopped tourists from going there, and they built a whole other cave that you can go to as if you are in the real cave, and it's near the real cave, but you don't get to go into the real cave. The Hall of Bulls itself is in a giant room deep in the cave, and there's other parts of the cave that are painted. It is discovered by the dog Robot, as your book says. And there are many kinds of animals painted on this cave wall. So here we have bison, large felines, horses, bulls. They're not all the same scale. They're not all on the same horizon line. They overlap. right? So it would be a mistake to think of this as like one big herd of animals. Like this is a scene that somebody went in and painted. It certainly is not. These were painted at all different time periods by many different people, um, without a lot of respect for what was there already. And we'll talk about that later. But we want to talk about this here, the pose of this bull. What prehistoric man starts doing, and we'll see this in other cultures, is showing the animal in profile, so sideways, always showing four legs. Sometimes if you're standing sideways or if you look at somebody who's sideways, you don't see their other arm or their other leg. That is not how these are shown. And even though their eyes are sideways, instead of the horns overlapping this way, they twist the head so that you can see two horns. And we call this a twisted perspective. And this is a conceptual imagery. If you want to think about it as logic, a horn has, or a bull has two horns and four legs. Why would I paint two legs? That doesn't make any sense. You can think of it that way. So here we have running horse, also in the Hollow Bulls. This is a famous one. And you could see that there are arrows and things being thrown at it or actually hitting it in some cases. And then there are these symbols that are repeated in many different things and places. A recent paper said that this might be the oldest thing ever made. This is actually much earlier than the cave, but that's still being debated before I pass that information on to you. And then this scene in Lascaux is also a famous scene. We have a wounded man, so we do see a human figure, a disemboweled bison. He has been hit, he's been speared. And then we have this bird figure on a stick. And I should say that the man also has like a bird face, and we can tell it's a man. He's shown to be a man. And there's a close-up of all those. So is there a narrative being shown? And these things were all painted at the same time. Is there some kind of narrative going on? What does a bird on a stick mean? What does it mean if a man has a bird face? Obviously, we can see a bison being hunted, what that would mean. Is the perspective of the man off? Is this some kind of magical thing happening? Human figures are rare in cave paintings, right? We do see the hands, but we don't see actual depictions of man. And men, like the female figures, are often abstracted, right? So here we have him abstracted as a bird face, but the animals are not. So we might consider the lion-headed man to be a human that's abstracted, not a lion that's abstracted. And that's what I mean about art history. Now we have some more evidence. We can go back and look at that and say, well, perhaps now we can understand that better. So the bird-headed man will be anthropomorphic again. And we don't know the narrative. I did ask you on your discussion question to come up to like some meaning. What are these? What's being communicated? Of course, there are educated guesses based on other historical things, but really, we just don't know. Now, this is from the Cheveau Cave. If you get a chance, because in class I showed this a little bit, there's a documentary called The Cave of Forgotten Dreams, where this famous German director Herzog goes into Cheveau Cave with his team, and he shows all this stuff, and it's just amazing. Like they get to travel in there and see all this stuff. So this is oryx horses and woolly rhinoceroses. And you see these guys are fighting, and then there's these. This is going to be the exception to the rule. I just talked about twisted perspective in Lascaux and other caves. Well, Cheval was a lot earlier. All right, so let's look at that. And there's the title of the documentary if you'd like to look at it. Cheval Cave was the most recent, and it's possibly dated at least 30,000 BCE. It has a lot of felines in it, and it has a lot of things, animals that are predators, not prey. And that's an important thing to note. We've been looking at these other caves that have things that would have been hunted or eaten, but Chavot shows a lot of animals that would have eaten humans. So perhaps they're telling different messages. We can see here the handprints and the dots. These are all at the beginning of the cave, and we have no idea what these are for. Is this some kind of signature, some kind of sign in when you come in, sign in when you have something like a punch clock or something? We don't know. But let's look at what's going on in Chavot Cave. First of all, this thing here. There's naturalism, is painting what you see. And then convention is an artistic device to convey what you know to be true. So that would be the twisted perspective. We know that a cow or a bull has two horns. Painting what you see in reality, if you're standing in the right spot and they overlap, you could just paint one big horn. All right. And the odd thing is, again, that Chavot is a lot earlier than Lascaux. So at what point did man decide that they needed to have some convention and show horns this way and not be naturalistic? So caves weren't always to be lived in. Most of the caves we look at with the paintings were not habitations. Were they shrines? Was there some kind of rite of passage to come in here and either make the painting or look at the painting? Subject is mostly Ice Age mammals. No consistent scale. There's a lot of overlapping. And when archaeologists have dated some of these things, of course, we know that the drawings within a cave are from many, many different time periods, as if people are finding these caves and painting right on top of somebody else's painting. One theory that a lot of archaeologists and art historians believe is that these caves were made for sympathetic magic. And the way I can explain that is like influences like. So it's very similar to voodoo dolls, right? If you make a voodoo doll of, say, your art history instructor, you have a test coming up, you put a pin in the doll, and maybe the test will be delayed or something. Don't do that, please. That would be sympathetic magic. So the like doll would influence the like me. All right. So does the drawing of these images give power over them? Are these works about the act of drawing and not the end result? And that is a theory that is kind of gaining momentum lately, because these things are being dated closer and closer as science gets, more advanced. We could see that. See, this is the first drawing. Somebody much later came in and just used the same contour around it, and in some cases just repeated something. So it's not about originality, and it's not really about painting a scene of animals interacting with each other or being hunted. So this horse, this is the first, and then second, third. It's just repeated. People coming in and doing the same thing around the horse. And then there are all these strike marks on top of them, for whatever those mean. Like, does that mean we're going to kill them? Is it arrows? Is it some kind of communication or language? We just don't know. Is the whole thing just symbolic, like a killing and renewing of animals? Or is it the act of drawing the magic itself? We don't know. That is really, I would say it's up to you, but it's not up to any of us. We have to wait and see if we can see. If not, we'll just guess. All right, so from terms we're going to use naturalism, I just talked about that. is imitation of nature based on what's already in existence. Abstraction is more like the female figures that we looked at. It's stylized, and it symbolizes concepts, possibly fertility or um, whatever it's supposed to be. All right, and then your book does not show this, but there is architecture in Paleolithic art, and this is a mammoth bone house found in Russia. And here's a reconstruction drawing. So prehistoric man, especially Paleolithic man, was very resourceful, even recycled everything. Of course, for a woolly mammoth, they're, carving the tusks. They're saving the bones for houses. They're wearing the skins. They would have lined this with skins on top of it to keep warm. So very environmental friendly. All right, the second time period we look at is Mesolithic art. And we talk about around 9000 BCE. The ice that covers much of northern Europe during the Paleolithic starts to melt. The climate is warming. Sea levels are rising, as they still are. And England becomes separate from Europe, and Spain becomes separate from Africa. Unfortunately, the woolly mammoths disappear, and we see reindeer migrating north. That's where they went to the North Pole, I guess. Paleolithic gives way to a transition period called the Mesolithic. So the Mesolithic is the in-between. And honestly, your book doesn't really show much art for the Mesolithic. In the Mesolithic, we see the domestication of dogs. People are still nomadic. For the most part, we're going to look at one possibility. Bows and arrows are being used now, not just like running with clubs and spears. Fiber arts like baskets and nets are invented and being widely spread and used. There is herding. So Mesolithic man learns how to move animals around for grassland. There is a surplus of food because they have dogs now helping them. And just domesticate them because they think they're lovely, furry little puppies that they have sleeping in the mammoth bone houses with them. They are teaching them how to hunt. They have a need for helpers, so they look at the dogs as good hunters, and dogs by nature are friendly to humans, so that worked out. So they have that, and then they also have nets. They have baskets to carry their things. So all of this does lead to a surplus, and with a surplus of food comes more time for people. And if you don't have to spend all of your time hunting and gathering, other developments may take place. There is a development of trades and an increase in material culture, including art. And painting takes on a whole different narrative. Instead of some ritualistic events happening on there, possibly, we see like narratives probably as teaching tools. You see the bows and arrows. Maybe a young hunter would be sent into the cave and shown like this is how it's going to be done. That's not to say this could not be ritualistic, sort of like the Field of Dreams movie. If you build it, they will come. But we see man more and more in art interacting with nature. This is a famous one. Again, neither one of these is in your book. I'm not sure why they ignored the Mesolithic, but it's an important thing to talk about because we see the transition, the Meso, from the Old Stone Age to the revolutions of Neolithic. Neolithic seems like it came out of nowhere, but it takes a long time to get there. And these paintings sort of show how it does happen. So this is herds of animals. This is a rock painting found in the Saharan Desert. And you can see here, these rings would have been possible enclosures that the animals would have been put in. And then you can see them all lined up and they're herding them around. They're dealing with them. So they are Not farmers yet. They don't, they keep these animals and then they move them to different, when the animals like sort of deplete the land that they're on, they move them to another location. So in that way, they are nomadic, but they're not really running around hunting all the time because the herds are right there for them. And this is what the surplus is about. In the 1990s, again, very recent in art history, in Turkey, Göbekli Tepe, it's fun to say, was discovered, and that literally means in Turkish pot-bellied hill. It is a monument that was found um, that has a series of large T-shaped monoliths. We're going to remember that word. It's a large single piece of or block of stone. Lith again means stone, mono meaning one, so one big stone. And the whole um, structure or series of structures surrounded by large stone walls. And this is a significant finding because archaeologists thought that giant monuments did not exist before agriculture took hold, meaning people have not it had not been established that people started to stay in one place and build upon a land and make giant monuments that will be permanent structures yet. So when this is found, archaeologists think, well, what does this mean? These are still uh, much older than they thought big monuments would have made. The book puts this into they call it pre-pottery Neolithic. It's okay with me if you call it Mesolithic because they still aren't, they're still nomadic and they still do not have agriculture. So I would say that they are very, very, very early Neolithic or Mesolithic, which is fine with me. So you can see here all these monuments. It's better to see a reconstruction probably. So archaeologists look at this and think, well, look at these giant monoliths, these T-shaped monoliths, and then the smaller, but they're by no means small, they're about 1,500 pounds, right? This walled-in structure, how much manpower and forethinking this would have taken sort of blew archaeologists' minds. Like this is much earlier than they thought man either had the ability or the desire to do. So these T-shaped pillars have they don't have domesticated animals on them. They have these they have bugs, scorpions, wild boars, leopards, predators. It also has human hands and arms are carved on them. Some of them are lower relief sculptures, and some of them are very high relief sculptures. This actually looks very medieval to me. And then here you can see the hands wrapping around this one. So why are they doing this? This is pre-agriculture. One of the things that's revolutionary to art history is that these tribes must have been much, much larger than it was thought they would have been for them to get all this. There must have been a division of labor and craft. This might possibly be the first known temple. There are antelope and reindeer bones buried. Was it kind of some kind of sacrifice? Do the T-shaped monoliths represent people or ancestors? Um, at this point, there still is no planting of crops. But what they do is they domesticate the environment, and that means they kill off the predators, they burn the grasses, and then they have an abundance of herds that they move to other grasses as the other grasses grow back. So they're not planting food yet. They are manipulating the land to have food for the animals, though. So did agriculture allow social stratifications and structures of society, or did the structure come first? That's the question with Göbekli Tepe. these people were very, very organized as a society. And this was thought that this wasn't really a possibility until society was stable and lived in one place and organized, and then eventually had laws and writing and whatnot. But it's not known, of course, what these people did know or why they were doing it. But this monument is still rewriting history. In your book, I think they even call it 9,000 BCE, and now it's known that it's at least 11,000 BCE. All right, now we're on to Neolithic art, the new Stone Age, the last Stone Age we'll talk about. And of course, the big thing that happens in the Neolithic age is agriculture. Man learns how to plant crops, grow food. There's domestication of even more animals. All right, even though very early Neolithic is still hunting, they do have, the herds are in like pens and things like that. That doesn't say they don't still have the taste for other animals to go out hunting. That's still a thing with our organized society. There are permanent structures, some of them very, very big, and there will be very organized societies. So also in Turkey, we have Çatalhöyük, around 6,000 BCE, and this is, of course, a reconstruction drawing. Now see, without the in-between structure of mesolith, this seems to appear out of nowhere from caves to this. Of course, there are many structures probably in between. And I should point that out. I said, was that the first temple for the Göbekli Tepe? But it was not. Most likely there are many temples in between that have not been found that led to that kind of temple. I mean, that's a very elaborate temple to appear out of nowhere. All right, so here we have this whole big structure. If you want to think about it as an apartment complex, which is kind of is, each one is for its own family. I guess they're just hanging out on the roofs there. This is also a restored view. And so these are not at ground level. To get into them, you have to go up ladders. And the only thing you need to do to protect yourself from roaming nomads is to lift up the ladders, and they can't get up there. This is a wall painting from Çatalhöyük, and we still have paintings of hunting. So this doesn't go away, even though this is a very stable environment. They have agriculture. Obviously, they have all kinds of communal everything there. They are still hunters, and they are hunters who make paintings of hunters. This is one of the earliest agrarian societies, so they're planting things, they're still hunting. The buildings are made of mud and brick, much like adobe in the Southwest here. Communal structures with common walls, so they are like apartment buildings, which means it's easier to build, but safer, like you're in a close community for protection. And we'll see this over and over again. Obviously, you can probably jump right to, the moats surrounding medieval places. All right. There's shrines, there's places for garbage. They're very organized. It's very much like a little organized society where everybody has their place and their job. It flourished for over 400 years, and then it was abandoned. So that's why it's just remains now, possibly because of a volcano. And this is a reconstruction drawing down below of this relief sculpture in Çatalhöyük, and you can see this dotted thing here. This is that thing, and these are like the buildings, like it's Çatalhöyük. And you can see that it looks like it's a volcano. So was this thing constantly threatening them to the point where, they decided to move, or did it finally erupt? Was this carving made way before it erupted, and then finally the last society, it was abandoned, though. It wasn't just buried in a volcano like other things we'll look at. This may very well be the very first landscape we look at as well. Then we'll go over to Jericho, another Neolithic society. And this, we can only look at reconstruction because Jericho is still an occupied city. It's the oldest um, continuous occupied place. This is looking east. So it's again a village like Çatalhöyük. And as its wealth grows, there's a need for protection against nomads. It has 5-foot thick walls and a stone tower that is 30 feet high and 33 feet in diameter. For Neolithic time, that is very big. Right? Even Stonehenge doesn't have anything like that. This is also from Jericho. They like to take the skulls of their dead. They would bury their dead, so that's known. They have burial practices. And again, I mentioned this before in the Paleolithic of societies not burying their dead. When a society does establish itself and they're stable and they're in one place, the more people you get, the less space you have, and you have to deal with the remains of the dead. And people still aren't living very long lives. So what you do with your dead is sort of a mark of civilization. So they are burying their dead, but then afterwards they would dig it up and take the skull. They would add plaster to it and paint it. They would put shiny shells inside the eyes. And it's some kind of preservation or whatever it meant to them. There's still no writing, so we don't know. It could be like a death mask kind of thing, or some kind of magical ritual, religion. We don't know what they're doing it for. This is also in Jordan. This is a human figure. And this is just a little plaster figure. It was plaster over reed and twine. Some of them have clothing, some of them do not. There's no gender indicated. We don't know what they're supposed to be. We can look at the proportions of the arms and say maybe it's not super naturalistic. Some are as long as 3 feet tall. And we're going to start to use this term, votive figure, which means it's an offering to a god. Because these are buried, figures that look like humans and then buried, their use seems to be buried for a reason. Over to Europe. And Europe in the Neolithic time is very fond of using megaliths. Now we had, the word lith means stone, and mega means mega, big, right? So these gigantic stones for their structures. All right, so we look at a passage grave in Ireland. Again, dealing with the dead becomes an avenue for artwork. We can put it that way. All right, so this is a tomb with a lone stone corridor right here, leading to a burial chamber covered by an earthen mound. So here's the tumulus right here. So this is a cut plan drawing. We're looking down at it. We're not going to mistake this for a cross just yet. It's too early for that. That's just a coincidence. All right, so this is a passage grave, passage, and then the burial. All right, and then here's the mound from the sky. And these are some of the stones that are in front of it, and you can see these are megaliths, but they're also mono, meaning monoliths. So one big giant stone with decorative swirls carved in. Looks like Starry Night for my money, but I don't think Van Gogh saw this. Also with these two megaliths holding up this other megalith, and we'll talk about what that's going to be. In this passage grave is a corbel dome. This is, we're talking about like architectural terms now. So a corbel dome is a dome formed by the piling of stone blocks in horizontal courses, cantilevered inward to form a dome. And this is what it looks like on the inside. So this is in the passage to the grave. One day of the year, the sun would shine down the corridor into the vault. And so we see in agricultural cultures a concern with the sun and the moon. That is a very logical thing to jump to, but it is a thing that is backed up over and over again by other monuments. And domestic architecture, just to show you this is just a little tiny thing in your book. They're building houses now. These are stable societies. This is in Scotland, and these are corbelling, right? These are just like courses, rows of stones. There's no mortar yet, so it's not, they're just literally just weighing each other down. This would have been some kind of refrigerated system. And then these, as comfortable as they look, are beds. So domestic architecture, and it's in this hilly thing sort of dug into the land, which would have made it a lot warmer. And we should note that a lot of cultures, of course, we'll get to Egypt and see this, are built by water because it's very convenient to live by the water for food and whatnot. We'll go over to Hagar Quim. This is an aerial view of the structure. Another sort of monument, we can call it, I guess. Right, this is most likely for some ritualistic purpose. It has all these chambers. Of course, it's still made of stone. We're in the Stone Age. It's in Malta. Oh, sorry, that should be before. Malta is off the coast of Sicily, Italy. It's definitely believed to be a temple with ritual spaces made with megaliths. And as your book points out, it is a combination of rectilinear, like lines, if you see linear, and curved forms. It has altars and stone statues of headless, nude women, like so. I don't know why your book doesn't show some of these because they're pretty spectacular. It looks as if they would have had heads or they stuck something. No heads were found, but it looks like they might have had something to put in there. I don't know. They have these carved holes in them. And there's dozens of these, and there's one gigantic one that's sort of just a fragment now of one of these. So let me go back to this for this. And I showed you this at the passage where everything. So whenever you have stones that are vertical and they hold up a horizontal, and it doesn't have to be stone, it could be wood, obviously. We call this type of construction post. The posts are the verticals, and the lintel is the element that spans overhead. And just so you know, we still use post and lintel. We stole it right from Neolithic man. Stonehenge definitely uses post and lintel. This, of course, I'm sure you've heard of Stonehenge. This is one of the wonders of the world or the mysteries of the world. And man, are there a lot of documentaries on this if you'd like. I think the best one is probably The Secrets of Stonehenge, although it looks a little dated now when I look back at it. All right, so a henge means circle, and usually it means a circle of stones. It can be timber, but in general, we just say henge. It means the circle itself. So here you have a giant hinge and then smaller hinges with inside. For Stonehenge, so it's all laid out. This is all dug in, and then there is the heel stone, which marks the summer solstice. If you're looking in the middle of Stonehenge outward on the summer solstice, you will see the sunrise right over the heel stone, as if the sun comes over it like a halo or something. So Stonehenge has a lot of phases. I think it goes from 8,000 BCE to something crazy, like 1100 CE or something, because people keep reusing it for different things. Not now, of course. The Aubrey holes possibly indicate the moon cycle, and I'll show you those in a second. It was a burial site at one point, a healing place at another point. There are other henges. There are avenues and henges that connect the henges. The blue stones in the circle are from Wales, 150 miles away, and this was actually one of the big mysteries of Stonehenge for a long time. How did they get those stones there? It's across water. Um, and there's at least 2 documentaries that show people building boats and trying to get stones across. They took great care to align astronomical events. We have the summer and winter solstice, and then 90 degrees to that. We have the moonrise and moonset. And it's unique to this location. So the 90-degree thing is unique to this. It doesn't work that way everywhere. So here you have it. So here we have the summer and winter solstice, and 90 degrees to that is where you get these moonrise and moonset. So that's the 90 degrees. That doesn't happen everywhere. Like if you go out in your yard and you figure out where the summer solstice is lined up, you will most likely will not have a 90-degree angle for this other event. And again, there's so many things about Stonehenge that are a mystery, probably because so many people did so many things with it. But what we can say, of course, is that it has to do with astronomy, right? It's sort of a one-to-one correlation that Paleolithic man seems to be all about hunting and gathering, and their artwork seems to be about that as well, and fertility, and that Neolithic man seems to be about agriculture. Right? Their artwork seems to be about it, and now their building structures seem to have a fascination with the seasons, right? These are very important if you're going to have good crops and wealth eventually. All right, that's the end of the chapter. I will make a video for chapter 2 and email if you have any questions. Thanks.